Hi guys, big news. Trump intentionally downplayed the COVID-19 danger. Was it something I didn't know before? Not really. But the question is whether Trump is personally responsible for the death of 200,000 Americans. Let's figure this out. Basically, we have a Washington Post associated editor, Bob Woodward, who wrote a book about Trump in 2018, and Trump didn't like it and told him that next time he's gonna write a book about him, he should directly call and conduct some interviews. And as the result, Woodward conducted 18 on-the-record interviews with Trump over the period from December to July this year. And now his new book, Rage, is about to be released on September 15th. There is one interview from this book which media is crazy about. Let's listen to it.
And so what was President Xi saying yesterday?
Well, we were talking mostly about the virus, and I think he's going to have it in good shape, but, you know, it's a very tricky situation.
Indeed
it goes through air, Bob. That's always tougher than the touch. You know, the touch, you don't have to touch things, right? But the air, you just breathe the air, and that's how it's passed. And so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than your strenuous flus. You know, people don't realize we lose 25,000, 30,000 people a year here. Who would ever think that, right?
I know. It's
pretty amazing. And then I say, well, is that the same thing? This is more deadly. This is 5 per. You know, this is 5% versus 1% and less than 1%. You know, so this is deadly stuff.
John, This interview happened on February 7, and most of coronavirus was still in China during that date. From the public data, we can see that there were 34,000 cases in China and 722 people died, which is like 2% death rate, not 5%, as Trump said. So probably someone told him that death rate will increase, and he assumed that it's 5%. There is nothing secret in this conversation. At the beginning of pandemic, everyone thought that the death rate is pretty high. Now we know that it's probably 1% or even less. Another thing, airborne transmission. It is true that on January 14th, WHO published that this is not an airborne disease. But later they corrected themselves, and around February it was clear to everyone that this is an airborne disease. Again, this was a part of public information. So what's wrong with this interview? Media tries to convince us that Trump knew that there's going to be a huge pandemic in US, and this is not true because President Xi assured Trump that virus is under control. It's important to understand that on February 7th, all the Western world assumed that this will be ended up in the same way as original SARS. Basically, in 2002-2004, there were only 8,000 cases and only 774 people died worldwide. Back then, most of the cases were happening in China, and they basically managed to keep it there. Of course, at that point, China knew that this is way more contagious than SARS, and nothing can stop this virus. And this piece of information was not shared with President Trump or anyone else in the world. So what happened next? From February 11th, China's statistics showed that the virus got contained within China border, which kind of reassured the whole world that it won't spread too far. Problem here is that this statistic is most likely fake. At that point, it was quite wise for Trump to downplay the virus, because he knew that it was deadly. He knew that there are going to be some isolated cases in US, but it won't go as far as pandemic. Situation changed dramatically on February 21st, when cases in Italy ramped up from 3 to 20, and the next day was 79, and the day after was 150. And then it was like 30% daily increase for the next 2 weeks. Europe realized that the virus is there and it's way more contagious than they anticipated at the beginning, and nothing can stop it. On March 10th, Angela Merkel told that virus will infect 60 to 70% of the German population, and we cannot do anything about this, and we have to accept it and prepare for lots of death. This time, so-called scientists overestimated how contagious and deadly the virus is, and basically they predicted crazy infection rate and crazy death rate, and as you know, it never ever happened. Nonetheless, on March 10th, Italy decided to make a lockdown. European countries were watching all of this and observed a daily increase rate of 10-15%. My guess is that most of the leaders assume that the virus is so contagious, so it will be everywhere within 1 or 2 months. So why don't we make a lockdown for a month to slow the spread and unload the medical system? 1 month is not a big deal for economy, but voters can appreciate that governments wanted to save their lives, right? What was going on in US in the same time? In February, CDC produced 160,000 tests, but unfortunately they were completely inaccurate and this was not realized immediately. As a result, all testing was significantly delayed. At the end of February, there were only 24 official US cases, but when testing started to ramp up, cases started to grow in a similar dynamic as in Italy. On the March 10th, there were 936 cases and 31 deaths. On March 16th, US introduced a 15 days soft lockdown, which was extended for 30 more days. Again, my guess at this point that Trump assumed that 60 to 70% of the population will get it, so we will need like 1 or 2 months of lockdown and it will be gone like a flu. But the lockdown in Italy actually worked. At the beginning of April, there were only 4% daily rate increase, and at the mid of April, it was only 2%. At that point, everyone realized that virus can be stopped with the lockdown. But the lockdown costs too much in terms of economy, and the majority of people who are outside of the risk group think it's a little bit too much. As you can see, Trump did exactly the same as Europe did. We can't really say that some important information was hidden from the public. One of the biggest mistakes is obviously testing. Instead of taking China-Germany protocols to create reliable tests, CDC decided to create their own version of test, which is a standard decision of CDC and it has nothing to do with Trump's decision. Finally, if you look at the death rate per 1 million of population, you can see that US is only number 11, not number 1 as media suggests. 200,000 lives sounds crazy, but US is the third most populated country in the world. Some of you might say that thousands of lives can be saved if everyone was wearing a mask back in March. Just look at Spain. Yesterday they got 10,000 cases and everyone is wearing a mask there. And in the same time, look at Switzerland, when no one is wearing a mask except public transport, and they actually introduced this public transport thing only in July. Their numbers are much better. Masks are nice, but they can't solve COVID crisis. Thanks for watching. Tell me if you think that Trump is liable for all the death or not, and don't forget to subscribe, and see you next time. Bye.